Hey everybody. So when you have some sort of harmonic or accompanimental figuration, especially in one of the wind instruments, it's oftentimes, I think, a good idea to split the figuration up in between two voices, especially when they have different intervals, like alternating neighbor tones. It gives the sense of continuous movement, in this case continuous 16th note movement. But the individual parts are actually quite easy, right? It's not always, especially if you're in a difficult key, and especially if it's a brass instrument, it's not always super easy to have like a yabba dabba 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 dabba, you know, the things that string players can do super easily and pianists can do easily, are not always super easy for the winds. It probably would be in this instance, but it also gives a sort of textural kind of back and forth. So if you have something like this, and then you have this, right? So together they really just constitute a third, kind of Lydian third, and then with some neighbor tones, and in combination, they sound like this. Right, really nice sense of movement there. And you don't have to necessarily keep that type of thing going with everything else. It can be a bit busy when you add lots of detail. And that's another nice thing about this, is you don't really have to worry about the intervallic counterpoint when the neighbor tones happen at different times, right? So in combination with some of the other woodwind instruments, I think that's all I had. Oh yeah, and we have English horn. Sounds like this. Right. And in combination with the brass, who are playing chords. Right. And whenever you have a sort of build like this is kind of a side note, I think it's also often a good idea to use something I like to call terrace dynamics, where you add more and more instruments. It's not just sort of like you have this dynamic push, and then at the climax or at the downbeat of this bar, then you add all the instruments. You can add instruments gradually, and I think one piece of music that does this very well is Forbidden Friendship, which is a cue from the How to Train Your Dragon soundtrack by John Powell. There are several moments, and also, what's it called? See You Tomorrow is another great example of this, you know, where he's like yum dum 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 dum, and the layers of heaven, he adds lots of different layers, and as long as you make them all, you know, work contrapuntally. So another thing that I did with this texture, kind of adding to that, was I took to reiterate, if you use harmonic notes only from the harmony, you don't have to worry about counterpoint, because all the notes are constant with every other note, right? Even though we do have this half-step rub, it's a part of the chord, and so we don't have to consider it contrapuntally, right? So we have sort of an imitative, right? And then the same thing here. It's basically just a giant, you wouldn't call it a hemiola, it's more just like displacement, imitation, displacement. So we've got this. And then with this, the marimba added to the vibraphone and xylophone. And then finally the xylophone. Right, and then with the tubular bells further on. Right, and this is all on top of the brass playing, the woodwinds playing. So the woodwinds sound like this, basically everybody except the brass, and you get this nice little color. And, you know, I think I've said in other videos, and a lot of orchestrators, you know, tend to say not to have more than, you know, 4 ideas simultaneously, because it's just cacophonous. But I think when all the notes belong to the harmony and you just have a myriad of textures, it really gives this impressionistic sort of magical kind of wash of color. But it doesn't sound muddy, again, because you're using notes only from the chord. Right. And even when we have this simple little brass part writing, you know, just little things like this. It could have easily just been, which I think is what I originally wrote it as, right? It could just be this. But listen to how much more boring this is compared to the other. And then listen with the little parts added. Right. Everything together. Same thing here. Yum, bum, 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 bum. Whenever an idea repeats, you know, you could add more instruments. So, got horns. And the woodwinds come in with a run to double the second half. Yeah, so again, lots of little tiny little textural things that you can do that really add a lot of life and color and subtlety and detail to take your kind of, you know, basic accompaniment and melody idea and kind of dress it up a bit more orchestrally. But again, as long as you know, if you just use neighbor tones or passing tones, and if the rhythms are complementary, or if you only choose notes from the harmony, it's going to be, you're not going to run into problems of like too many notes and the notes aren't working and they're clashing and it just gets really, really busy. So yeah, hope you got something out of this. I will be posting again tomorrow.